The Viridian outpost hummed like a beehive made of metal and light. Ships of a dozen different shapes floated in the docking bays, their hulls marked with strange symbols and colors. Aliens of all kinds moved through the wide corridors, tall, thin beings with skin like polished glass. Short, furry creatures with too many eyes. Armored insect-like traders clicking softly to each other. It was a place where the galaxy came to trade, talk, and sometimes to forget the borders between stars. Most of them ignored the humans. Humans were new here. They had only joined the wider galactic community 10 years ago. Their ships were small. Their clothes were plain. Their voices were too loud, their steps too heavy. Many aliens thought of them as noisy children, curious, clumsy, and not very smart. Some called their home planet Deathworld in whispers, a joke about how wild and dangerous Earth was supposed to be. But no one really believed it. Not yet. Cale Renner didn't care what they thought. He was 17, lean and quick, with dark hair cut short and eyes that watched everything. He wore a simple gray jumpsuit with Renner freight, stitched over the chest. His job today was simple. Deliver a sealed data crate from Dock 7 to the Zentauri trade office in Sector Gamma. Easy. Routine. He'd done it a dozen times before. But today, the corridor was crowded. Cale moved fast, weaving between slow-moving aliens, his boots tapping softly on the polished floor. He held the crate tight against his chest. It wasn't heavy, but it was important, some kind of mineral contract. His father would yell if it was late. Then, around the corner, he saw her. Sub-Commander Varel of the Zentauri hegemony stood like a blade made flesh. She was tall, nearly 8 feet, with a segmented, chitinous body that gleamed like black pearl. Her 6 limbs moved with perfect control, her upper arms folded across her chest, her lower pair resting lightly on her belt. Her face was smooth, eyeless, with only a single vertical slit where a mouth should be. Around her, other aliens gave her a wide berth. The Zentauri were old, powerful. They didn't like being touched, or even looked at too long. Cale tried to step aside, but the crowd pushed him forward. His shoulder brushed against the edge of her armored forearm. It was a tiny touch. Barely a whisper of contact, but Varel froze. Then, in one sharp motion, her upper right limb snapped out. A thin wand, glowing faintly blue, appeared in her grasp. Before Cale could speak, before he could even flinch, she jammed the tip into his ribs. There was no warning. No shout, just a sudden, searing pain that exploded inside him like a star going supernova. His muscles locked. His vision went white. He dropped the crate. It clattered to the floor, ignored. Virel leaned close. Her voice was a dry rasp, like stone grinding on stone. Vernon learns its place. Then she stepped back, as if she'd done nothing more than swat a fly. Cale collapsed to his knees, gasping. His whole body trembled. Sweat poured down his face. His heart hammered like a drum about to burst. But worse than the pain was the shame. Everyone was watching, and no one moved to help. A security drone hovered nearby, its red eye blinking slowly. It recorded everything, but did nothing. The Zentauri had full diplomatic immunity on Viridian Outpost. What she'd done wasn't illegal. Not to them. Cale tried to stand. His legs wouldn't obey. His lungs burned. He saw his hands shaking violently. But he didn't cry out. He bit down on his lip until it bled, tasting copper. A human dock worker finally rushed over. Cale, gods. The man knelt, radioing for medics. It's a neural stunner. Full charge. Why would she? Because I'm human, Cale whispered, his voice rough. And she thinks we're nothing. The medics arrived quickly, 2 humans and 1 soft-bodied Gelthian with gentle, padded hands. They loaded him onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, Cale looked back once. Varel hadn't moved. She stood perfectly still, surrounded by silence. No one dared approach her. No one even looked her way. In the medbay, the human doctor shook her head. She used a military-grade neural disruptor. This wasn't a warning tap. This was meant to cripple. Maybe kill? But I'm... Okay, Cale said, confused. His pain was already fading, replaced by a strange, buzzing warmth in his bones. You shouldn't be, the doctor muttered, checking his vitals again. Your nervous system took a massive shock. Most species would be in a coma. Or dead. She looked at him like she'd never seen him before. But your body, it's fighting back. Fast. Faster than anything I've ever recorded. Cale didn't understand. He just felt tired. And angry. News of the attack spread fast through the human section of the outpost. Word reached Ambassador Liara Cho within the hour. She was a calm woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She said nothing at first, just listened. Then she walked straight to the local Concord arbitrator, a slow-moving, four-eyed bureaucrat from the Lumari Collective. I demand justice, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The arbitrator blinked. Justice? Sub-Commander Varel acted within her rights. Your citizen entered a restricted honor corridor. Contact with a Zentari officer is punishable by disciplinary correction. It was an accident, Liara said. He was 17. He bumped her by less than an inch. Intent is irrelevant, the arbitrator said, waving a thin hand. Custom is law. The Zentari do not tolerate physical contact from lesser species. The punishment was mild by their standards. Mild? Liara's voice hardened. He nearly died. Yet he lives, the arbitrator said, turning back to his scrolls. File a formal grievance with the Galactic Concord Council if you wish. But do not waste my time with human sensitivities. Liara left without another word. Back at the human consulate, Cale sat up in bed, wrapped in a thin thermal blanket. His body ached, but his mind was clear. He watched the news feeds, saw how other species talked about the incident. Some laughed. Others shrugged. A few called humans too soft for space. No one said Varel was wrong. But then something strange happened. His breathing slowed. His muscles stopped trembling. The pain didn't just fade, it disappeared. By nightfall, he could walk. By morning, he could run. The doctor called it unnatural recovery. Cale just called it Tuesday. Ambassador Cho visited him that evening. She sat on the edge of his bed, her face serious. The council won't act unless we make them, she said. We're asking for a full hearing. They'll probably ignore us. But we have to try. Cale looked at his hands. They were steady now, strong. What if they don't listen? He asked. Liara sighed. Then the galaxy will keep thinking we're weak. Cale said nothing. But in his chest, something stirred, a quiet, burning thing. Not fear, not even anger. Just certainty. He remembered Earth. The storms that tore trees from the ground. The diseases that killed millions. The wars that scorched whole continents. And through it all, humans kept standing. Kept building. Kept going. Maybe that's why they called Earth Deathworld. Not because it killed people, but because it taught them how to survive anything. Cale stood up. I'll testify, he said. Liara looked surprised. You're still recovering. I'm fine, he said. And for the first time, he believed it. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The galaxy didn't know humans yet. Not really, but it would. The Concord Citadel floated in the void between stars, a great wheel of crystal and light that turned slowly around a calm blue star. It was the heart of galactic law, where species older than human civilization came to speak, argue, and sometimes to judge. Ships from 100 worlds drifted in its silent docks. Inside, the air smelled clean and cold, like mountain snow and polished stone. Humans had no seat on the council. They were allowed to watch, to listen, to speak only when asked. Ambassador Liara Cho stood in the human delegation's small viewing box, her hands folded, her face calm. Behind her, Kale Renner sat quietly, wrapped in a dark coat. He looked pale, but his eyes were sharp. He had insisted on coming. If they're going to decide my worth, he'd said, they should see my face. Below them, the council chamber stretched wide and deep. 42 species filled the curved benches, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some sat in water tanks. Others hovered in antigrav bubbles. A few were nothing but voices from smooth black stones. At the center of it all stood Sub-Commander Virel, her chitinous armor gleaming under the soft light. She did not look at the humans. She did not even seem to know they were there. The presiding judge was Elder Tolan of the Velm, a species known for patience and fairness. His body was long and thin, covered in soft silver fur, his many eyes blinking slowly as he read the case file. The grievance is clear, he said, his voice like wind through reeds. A human youth, Kale Renner, was struck by a Zentari neural disruptor in public space. He claims the contact was accidental. The Zentari claim he violated sacred personal space. The Rel spoke without turning. The human entered an honor corridor. His touch was an act of disrespect. My correction was merciful. A low hum of agreement rose from several benches. The Zentari were respected, feared even. Their empire spanned 600 systems. Humans? They had one planet and a few dozen rusty ships. Liara stepped forward to the speaking rail. Merciful? She said, her voice steady. Your correction delivered enough neural energy to paralyze a full-grown Grak warrior. Kale is 17. He's not a soldier. He's a delivery boy. She played the security footage on the central holo display. Everyone watched as Kale, moving fast, brushed against Varel's arm. A split second later, the disruptor flashed. Kale fell. Gasps rose from a few benches. Others remained silent. He moved carelessly, said a reptilian delegate from the sick dominion. Responsibility lies with the one who does not know the rules. Liara turned to face the chamber. We are new here. We learn. But should a mistake cost a child his life? Should it be punished like a crime? Laurel finally turned her smooth, eyeless face toward the human box. Your species breeds too fast. You lack discipline. You crowd space like insects. You do not understand order. That is your weakness. A murmur spread. Some agreed. Others shifted uncomfortably. But no one defended the humans. Kale stood up. All eyes turned to him. He walked to the rail, slow but steady. He didn't look at Virel. He looked at the council. I'm not here to beg, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. I'm here to tell you what happened. He paused, swallowed, then continued. I was carrying a crate. I was late. The corridor was full. I didn't see her until it was too late. I didn't mean to touch her. But even if I had, should that be a death sentence? He lifted his shirt slightly, showing the dark bruise along his ribs. This is what merciful looks like. I couldn't breathe for hours. My heart kept trying to stop. But I didn't die. He looked around at the alien faces. You all think Earth is a joke. You call it Deathworld and laugh. But Earth doesn't kill people just to be cruel. It kills to teach. And we learned. He took a deep breath. She tried to break me. But Earth breaks everything. And we learned to stand anyway. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Elder Tolan spoke. Your words are brave, young human. But law is not moved by courage alone. He turned to the chamber. The Zentari acted within their customs. The human failed to follow local protocols. The punishment, while severe, was not illegal under Concord guidelines for diplomatic immunity. Liara's face tightened. So that's it? No justice? Justice, Tolan said gently, is balance. We cannot force one culture to obey another's morals. The sub-commander will receive a formal reprimand and pay a fine of 5,000 credits to the human delegation. A few aliens nodded. It was more than many expected. Varel gave a small, stiff bow. The matter is closed. But Kale didn't move. He stood there, staring at his hands. His breathing was even. Too even, Liara frowned. She knew that look. Then, without warning, Kale swayed. His knees buckled. Liara caught him just before he hit the floor. Kale! She shouted. Medics rushed, inhuman and alien both. They scanned him quickly. His heart was racing. His blood pressure was dropping. Neural activity was spiking in strange patterns. What's happening? Liara demanded. The lead medic, a human named Dara, looked grim. It's the after effect of the disruptor. We thought he'd recovered, but his body's been under stress this whole time. His systems are crashing. Can you save him? Dara hesitated. We'll try. They carried Kale out on a stretcher. The council watched in silence. Some looked away. Others stared with cold curiosity, as if watching an animal die. The hearing ended soon after. Back on the human shuttle, Kale lay still, connected to humming machines. His skin was cool. His eyes stayed closed. Liara held his hand, her face tight with worry. You didn't have to speak, she whispered. Kale's fingers twitched. He opened his eyes for just a second. Had to, he murmured. Then he closed them again. 12 hours later, the medics called it. Kale Renner was gone. His heart had simply stopped. Not from the original injury, they said, but from the strain of pushing his body too far, too soon. He'd stood when he should have rested, spoken when he should have stayed silent. And his Deathworld body, tough as it was, had finally broken. The news spread fast. Across human space, people fell quiet. No protests. No angry broadcasts. Just silence. On Earth, factories slowed. Schools held moments of stillness. In orbit, human ships cut their non-essential lights. It was as if the whole species was holding its breath. The Concord Council moved on. The fine was paid. The reprimand filed. Varel returned to her flagship, already preparing her report. Human emotional instability confirmed. Species remains unfit for full Concord status. She did not know that on Earth, scientists were already gathering. They had studied Kale's body, his final scans, his blood dot, and they had found something strange. When the neural disruptor hit him, his body had flooded with chemicals, endorphins, adrenaline, stress proteins far beyond normal levels. But more than that, those chemicals had interacted with the Zenthary weapon's biofeedback system, which recorded the victim's biological response. In that moment, Kale hadn't just been hurt. He had infected VIRELL. Not with a virus, but with the very essence of Deathworld biology. A storm of survival, signals that a creature like her, built for calm and control, could not understand, could not survive. The humans didn't know it yet. But Kale's death had already started its work, and the galaxy would soon learn that when you hurt a human child, you don't just face a species. You face the world that made them. But for now, in the cold halls of the Concord Citadel, no one noticed. They thought it was over. They were wrong. Earth did not scream when Kale died. It did not shout or burn its ships in anger. Instead, it went quiet, so quiet that even the deep space listening posts on Mars picked up the change. Human channels across the network went dark. Civilian chatter vanished. Only military and emergency signals remained. humming in tight, coded bursts. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like grief, like surrender. But those who knew humanity knew better. On the surface, cities still moved. Trains ran. Children went to school. But in government bunkers beneath the mountains, in labs buried under ice, and aboard silent orbital stations, people worked. Not with rage, but with cold, sharp focus. They studied Kale's last medical logs again and again. They ran simulations. They tested blood samples. They spoke in low voices about biology, pain thresholds, and something they called neurochemical overflow. No one declared war. No fleet mobilized. But every human ship that could dock did. Every scientist who understood xenobiology was called home. Even the miners on Titan and the farmers on Luna paused their work to listen. Because Kale wasn't just a boy. He was proof that Deathworld wasn't a joke. Back on Viridian Outpost, life returned to normal. Aliens forgot about the human incident quickly. Virel's name was cleared in official records. She gave a short statement to the Concord press pool. Discipline maintains order. The human's death was regrettable, but predictable. Their species lacks resilience. She believed it. She didn't know that her own nervous system had been quietly unraveling since the day she struck Kale. Inside her flagship, the Chitin Sovereign, Virel began having strange dreams. In them, her limbs moved without her command. Bright lights stabbed behind her mind. Sounds became too loud. Once, during a staff meeting, she flinched at the hum of the ship's engines, a sound she'd heard her whole life. Her officers noticed but said nothing. To question the Zentari commander was to invite death. Meanwhile, on Earth, Kale's body was prepared for burial, not in the ground, but for the stars. Human tradition held that those who died far from home, especially by injustice, should be sent back to the void with fire and honor. A small torchip, painted black with silver runes, was readied in low orbit. Kale's body lay inside, wrapped in a simple white shroud woven from earth cotton. No weapons, no treasures. Just his name, his age, and the words. He stood. Millions watched the launch from every continent. Ships in orbit cut their lights as the torchip passed. Even the Mars colonies observed a minute of silence. It wasn't just mourning. It was a promise. The ship would fly toward the galactic core, not to reach it, but to burn bright enough that telescopes across known space would see it. A message written in flame. We remember Dot in the halls of the Concord Citadel. Some aliens saw the broadcast. A few felt uneasy. One old Gelthian diplomat muttered to his aide, "They do not mourn like others. They prepare." But most dismissed it. Humans were emotional, dramatic. This was just their way. What they didn't see was the quiet work on a hidden research platform orbiting Neptune. There, Dr. Aris Mendez stood in a sterile white room, staring at a screen showing Virel's public health logs data legally collected after any diplomatic incident. The Zentari had submitted them proudly to prove she was unharmed. But Aris saw the truth. Her neural stability was dropping. Her stress markers were rising. Her body was reacting to something it couldn't name, something it had absorbed through her weapon's biolink the moment. Kale's nervous system screamed in pain. He didn't just survive her attack. Aris whispered to his team. He weaponized his own biology. And she carried it home. They recreated the compound. Not from poison. Not from metal, but from the very chemistry of human survival endorphins, cortisol, neurotrophins, all mixed in the exact ratios Kale's body had produced in his final hours. It wasn't toxic to humans, but to a being like Virel, whose species evolved in calm, low-stress environments over millions of years. It was like pouring wildfire into a glass vase. It's not a weapon, Aris said. It's a mirror. It shows her body what it's never known. Chaos, pain, the will to live at any cost. They tested it on Xanthari tissue cultures. The cells convulsed, then died. Now they had a choice: reveal it as a bioweapon and be labeled monsters. Or use it as justice. Ambassador Liara Cho visited the lab in person. She stood before the containment unit holding the pale liquid they now called Kale's Echo. "Can it be controlled?" she asked. "Yes," Uris said. "It only affects species with Xanthari-level neural sensitivity. It won't harm humans, Gelthians, anyone with high trauma tolerance. It's precise." Liara looked at the vial. "Then we don't bring war. We bring law." She returned to Earth and filed a new petition with the Galactic Concord Council. Not for punishment, not for revenge, for a trial, under an ancient rule called Article Sigmarite of Blood Recompense. A law so old, most thought it was myth. It allowed a wronged species to deliver a measured, witnessed consequence. So long as the council approved, few believed. They would say yes, but the council was curious, and more than a few were starting to wonder if they'd made a mistake. On the Chitin Sovereign, Durell woke screaming. Her limbs trembled. Her thoughts scattered like dust and wind. Her officers found her curled on the floor of her chamber. Her armor cracked from spasms she couldn't stop. "Call the medics," her first lieutenant whispered, fear in his voice for the first time. But the medics could find nothing wrong. Her body was fine. Her organs worked. Her mind was breaking. She didn't know why. She didn't know that across the galaxy, humans were watching and waiting. On Earth, the torchship carrying Kale's body reached its final burn point. Engines flared one last time, then died. The ship, now a silent ember, drifted onward toward the heart of the galaxy, where even the oldest stars would one day fade. But Earth did not fade. It sharpened, like a blade drawn from rock. And soon, the galaxy would feel its edge. The Concord Citadel had not seen such silence in centuries. Ships from dozens of species hovered in the docking rings, not to trade or talk, but to watch. Word had spread. The humans were returning. Not with weapons, not with threats, but with a request so old, so strange, that even the oldest delegates had to check their archives to remember it. Article Sigma, Right of Blood Recompense. Most thought it was a legend, a relic from an age when species settled debts with ritual, not courts. But the law was real, and the council, swayed by curiosity and a growing unease about the quiet humans, had voted to hear the case. 2/3 agreed. Barely. Now, in the great chamber, every seat was filled. Even the back rows, usually empty, held silent observers. Holographic recorders glowed in the air, ready to send every word across the galaxy. Ambassador Liara Cho entered alone. She wore no uniform, just a dark coat of earth wool, simple and strong. Her steps echoed on the stone floor. She walked to the center and stood before Elder Tolan and the council without bowing. "Humans do not ask for war," she said, her voice clear. "We ask for justice as your own laws allow." She activated a small device in her hand. A holo-image appeared. Kale, standing in the same chamber weeks ago, pale but steady. Then footage of his collapse. Then his still body on a medbay table. "We lost a child," Liara said. "Not in battle, not in accident, because he touched an officer by mistake. Because your laws said she could punish him without consequence." She paused. "But your laws also say that if a life is taken unjustly, the wronged may answer, not with fire, but with truth." She turned to face the benches. "We invoke Article Sigma. We do not seek her death. We seek her understanding. Let her face what she did. Let the galaxy see what happens when you harm a human." A murmur rose. Some delegates leaned forward. Others recoiled. Subcommander Varel entered then, escorted by Xanthari guards. She moved stiffly, her armor freshly polished, but her limbs trembled slightly. Her face showed no emotion, but her steps were slower than before. She did not look at Liara. Elder Tolan spoke. The request is granted under Article Sigma, Clause 7, Biological Consequence, Witnessed and Contained. Sub-Commander Varel, do you accept the terms? Varel's voice rasped. I accept. Let the primitives show their tricks. My body is pure. My will is unbroken. Liara did not smile. She simply nodded to a human technician in the viewing box. A clear, cylindrical chamber rose from the floor at the center of the room, made of reinforced crystal, sealed and sterile. Inside, a single chair waited. This is not a fight, Liara said. It is a demonstration. Varel walked in without fear. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss. Now, Liara explained what the galaxy had missed. When your officer struck Kale, she used a neural disruptor with a biofeedback link. It reads the victim's pain response to adjust its power. Standard Zentari design. She played a data stream on the central screen Kale's neural activity at the moment of impact. Spikes of endorphins, stress hormones, survival chemicals flooding his system. His body didn't shut down. It fought back, hard. Then she showed Varel's own medical logs from that day. A tiny echo of the same chemicals recorded through her weapons link. She didn't just hurt him, Liara said. She absorbed a piece of his biology, of Earth's biology, and her body has been trying to process it ever since. Confusion rippled through the chamber. What is your point, human? Demanded a delegate from the sick Dominion. Liar erased a small vial. Inside, a clear liquid shimmered faintly. This is what Kale's body made in his final hours. Not poison, not a weapon, just the chemistry of a human facing death and refusing to yield. She handed it to a neutral Gelthian scientist who confirmed its composition. No toxins. All natural human compounds. Harmless to most species. But not to hers, Liara said, looking at Varel. Elder Tolan studied the data. You claim this mixture will harm her? No, Liara said. It will show her what she did. It will force her body to feel what Kale felt, not the pain, but the storm inside him. The will to live that she tried to crush. She turned to Varel through the glass. You call this weak. But weakness doesn't survive on Earth. Only the strong do. And what makes us strong? Breaks things like you. The vial was placed into a sealed injector on the chamber wall. With a soft click, it connected to the air system. Varel sat perfectly still. I fear nothing from your child's sweat and tears. Liara stepped back. Then let truth speak. The technician pressed a button. A fine mist filled the chamber. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Varel straightened. Is this your great punishment? Mist? Then she blinked. Her upper limbs twitched. A low hum escaped her mouth, slit not words, but a sound of confusion. Her breathing quickened. On the council screens, her biosign spiked. Heart rate up. Neural activity surging. Stress markers off the scale. What is happening? Elder Tolan asked, alarmed. Liara watched, her face grim. Her nervous system is receiving signals it was never built to handle. In Zentari evolution, pain is rare. Conflict is controlled. Order is everything. She pointed to the screen. But this is chaos. It's the chemical echo of a human body screaming, I will not die. And her mind. It can't shut it out. Inside the chamber, Varel gripped the arms of the chair. Her chitin began to crack, tiny fractures spreading from her joints. Her limbs jerked as if pulled by invisible wires. She tried to speak. Only a dry rattle came out. Her body was not being poisoned, it was being overwhelmed by the very idea of survival. The Gelthian scientist whispered, her endorphin receptors are flooding. Her brain thinks it's under constant, unbearable attack. But there's no enemy. No wound. Just signal. Exactly, Liara said. Earth doesn't just hurt you. It makes you feel what it means to be alive against all odds. And to a species that never knew true danger. That feeling is madness. Varel's head snapped back. A sharp crack echoed in the chamber, her neck plate splitting. She was not bleeding. She was unraveling from the inside dot around the room. Delegates stood. Some backed away. A few covered their sensory organs. No one had ever seen a Zentari lose control. Not like this. She's not being killed, Liara said, her voice low. She's being shown the cost of what she did. The price of thinking humans are nothing. Varel's limbs flailed once, then stiffened. Her body went rigid. Her biosigns flatlined for 3 seconds, then surged again in a final, desperate wave. She was still alive, but her mind was gone. The mist-cleared silence filled the chamber. Elder. Tolan turned to Liara, his many eyes wide. This was your justice? Liara looked at the broken figure in the chair. No, this was her choice. She chose to hurt a human child. She chose to believe we were weak. We just showed her what weak really looks like. She turned to the council. Humans do not want your fear. We want your respect. And if you take our young, you answer not to our guns, but to the world that made us. She walked out without another word. Behind her, the galaxy watched Dot, and for the first time, they understood Deathworld was not a myth. It was a warning. The chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Inside the clear cylinder, Sub-Commander Varel sat slumped in the chair, her chitinous body still, her limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, a sound no Zentari had made in recorded history. Her mind, once sharp and proud, was lost in a storm it could not escape. The chemical echo of Kale's final moments had not killed her body, but it had shattered something deeper. Her sense of order, of control, of superiority. She was alive, but broken, and everyone in the council chamber saw it. Elder Tolan of the Velm slowly rose from his seat. His silver fur bristled slightly. His many eyes blinked in slow, troubled rhythm. He looked not at Varel, but at Ambassador Liara Cho, who stood near the exit, calm and unmoving. You did not bring violence, he said, his voice softer than before. You brought truth. Liara turned back. We brought what Earth gives to everything that tries to crush it, proof that life can fight back, even when it shouldn't. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked away, ashamed. Others watched Varel with new fear. The Zentari guards outside the cylinder made no move to enter. Their commander was no longer a leader. She was a warning. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke not in anger, but in awe. The Deathworlders. They do not conquer. They reveal. It was the old Gelthian diplomat, his soft body trembling. We laughed at that name. But Earth does not kill with claws or fire. It kills with truth. With resilience so strong, it bends reality. Liara walked back to the center, not in triumph, but in sorrow. Kale was not a soldier. He was a boy who believed in doing his job. And when he was hurt, he didn't beg. He stood. Even when his body failed, his spirit didn't. She looked at the council. We do not ask for revenge. We ask for memory. Remember what happened here. Remember that humans are not weak. We are survivors. And if you harm our young, you do not face a fleet. You face the echo of every storm, every disease, every war that tried to wipe us out and failed. Elder Tolan nodded slowly. The right of blood recompense has been fulfilled. Justice is served. He turned to his scribes. Record this day, and record this. humanity shall be granted full membership in the Galactic Concord Council, with all rights and protections. A wave of shock passed through the chamber. Full membership? Humans, newcomers, outsiders, children of Deathworld, given equal standing with ancient empires. But no one objected. How could they? They had just watched a human boy's final breath destroy a Xanthari officer without a single weapon fired. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Human ships were no longer ignored at docks. Human words were no longer dismissed in meetings. Diplomats who once sneered now spoke with care. Some even asked questions about Earth, about human history, about how a species so young could carry such weight in its blood. On Earth, there were no celebrations, no parades, just quiet work. Schools taught Kale's name. Factories built faster, stronger ships, not for war, but for presence. Humanity would not hide anymore. Kale's torchip, now far beyond the solar system, still burned faintly in deep space. Telescopes tracked its path. Alien scholars studied its meaning. To some, it was a funeral light. To others, a beacon. To humans, it was a promise kept. Back at the Concord Citadel, Varel was taken away by her own people. She would never command again. She would never speak clearly. But she lived a living lesson in what happens when you mistake gentleness for weakness. The Xanthari hegemony sent no protest, no demands for punishment. They withdrew their ambassadors for a full cycle in silence. When they returned, they bowed not to the council, but to the human delegation. Ambassador Liara Cho accepted it with a nod. She knew pride was not the goal. Respect was. Years later, statues of Kale Renner appeared on worlds far from Earth. Not grand monuments of metal and fire, but simple stone figures standing tall, hands at their sides, eyes looking forward. On Mars, on Viridian Outpost, even in the gardens of the Concord Citadel, they stood. Visitors would stop and ask, "Who is this?" And someone would answer, "A human boy who touched an officer by mistake," and taught the galaxy what it means to be from Deathworld. Humans never explained further. They didn't have to. The truth was in the silence that followed. In time, new laws were written. Rules to protect young, new species. Rules against using weapons that feed on pain. All inspired by one moment in a crowded corridor, one act of cruelty, and one boy who refused to stay down. Humanity never sought to rule the galaxy. They only asked to belong. And in earning that right, they changed it. Not with guns, not with conquest, but with the simple, terrifying fact that they had survived a world that tried to kill them every day. And still chose to be kind. But kind did not mean soft. And if you hurt their children, the Deathworlders would finish what you started. Not in anger, but in truth. And the galaxy, at last, understood.